What's up, YouTube? It's Zach here, and today I wanted to talk about exactly how to get the essence of Islam. Now, what does that exactly mean? So, I think, what my story was is I was born a Muslim. I grew up in the culture, but I didn't really pick up the Quran and read it until maybe I was, in my 20s. Um, and I think because of that, I didn't fully understand the essence of God, the essence of the Quran, the essence of Islam. And I was allowing the culture and the people around me to kind of influence how Islam was, and through that, it didn't give me the purest form of who God was or what Islam is really about. And so, what I'd want to say to you is whether you're an atheist, a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, agnostic, whatever you are, if you're just interested in Islam, well, how exactly is the best way to get introduced to it? I wouldn't even recommend, following, going to your local masjid and listening to the sheikh. I wouldn't recommend even, listening to online sheikhs, other than like a lot of the really good ones like Mufti Menk and all of them. I would honestly just say the by far best way to understand about Islam and what the essence of God is and really what everything is about is to just literally pick up the Quran, right? And so there's this belief that, oh, you have to read in Arabic and that's the only way to get in, words have double meanings and this and that. Okay, all of the people who say that are just Arabic speakers who think the Arab culture and languages is superior to all others. That's not true at all, because first of all, nobody speaks the ancient Arabic language anyways. It's almost like people who are native Arabic speakers and who read the Quran, they still have to, study the words and get annotations and all this. And the nice thing is this book here is speaking, it's a translation into English, right? They even have it into Spanish. They have it into any language that you could really think of, and it's annotated. So if you go over a certain part and you're not sure what it's referring to, it'll put an annotation and say this is referring to this battle that took place in this time frame. This is referring to something from the Bible. This is referring to something from the Torah. It's annotated. It's going to get more than even just picking up the Quran and reading it in its native Arabic language. So don't worry about that. But so I'm going to get into it. So what exactly is the essence of Islam and God? And so first and foremost, when we start a chapter or a surah as it's called, every chapter starts with BismAllah, Rahman, Raheem. Okay, so BismAllah, in the name of God, Rahman, the compassionate, Raheem, the merciful. So the most compassionate, the most merciful. So I want you to take a step back and think about this. An entity that created the whole world, that could destroy us in a blink of an eye, that could create a whole another human race or alien race or create the whole universe, the sun, whatever, all these atoms and things that we're still discovering, animals we're still discovering, things that are so great that we can't understand, right? We know gravity is real, we don't know how it works, right? There's such great things that God has created, and he's powerful. He could destroy, and he has destroyed, bad people and people didn't listen, that he gave warnings to. And he wants you to know him as the most compassionate and most merciful, right? It's almost like the most powerful country in the world. Let's say you have America, and they're military and they're like, oh, we're the most compassionate military and merciful military in the world. I mean, people look at it like a joke, like what? But that goes to show that this is what God, the essence of God is. The essence of God is mercy and compassion. And in the Quran, there's something called the 99 names, or of God, or in other words, the 99 attributes of God. And these are things that God wants you to know him as. And so when you break down what most of these attributes are comprised of, by far most of them are, something like the wadud, the loving, al-ghafur, al-afu. There's so many names for forgiving. There's so many names for the source of peace, salam, the source of peace. The just, there's so many names for forgiving, for mercy, for compassionate, the loving, the kind, the latif, and then God, when he starts his chapters, he wants you to know him as the compassionate and the merciful. So what we need to derive from is ultimately the essence of all religions stems from God. And so what does God want you to know him as? Compassionate, merciful, all forgiving. It's never too late to turn to him. It's never too late to seek forgiveness. You're never too far behind. God's love is always open to you. And so that's what we need to understand. And I wasn't getting that when I was growing up in Islamic culture. Maybe, hearing some sheikhs who have long beards and look angry and are screaming all the time, or from the Arabs who are a very judgy culture, who are not very compassionate and merciful, if we're going to be honest. If you look to the Middle East, you don't see a lot of compassion and mercy, if we're going to be real here. And so that's why it was important for me to get away from all the outside noise and just pick up the book myself and figure out what Islam is about. Now, another concept that I want to put on people is that the Quran is very easy. And so it's a very simple book. It's very easy. And in turn, Islam is very easy. It's very simple. Who makes it complicated? It's the people who say, oh, you're supposed to walk in the masjid with your right foot, or oh, you're supposed to do this, or you're not supposed to do this, or oh, you can't have gum in your mouth when you're praying, or whatever. If you take a shower, it's not the same as doing wudu, because did you do wudu in the shower? It's like there's these stupid people who I think they just want to be self-important, and they like to they think that I'm more moral than you, and it's really annoying, right? So the Quran is very simple. And so what do I mean by that? When you pick up a lot of when you pick up the chapters and you're pick up the book and you're reading through the chapters, there's a concept that I did wrestling and kickboxing, and our wrestling team was really good. We won state championship 2 years in a row. We never placed lower than third. And it was because we had a good coach, and our coach actually, he got a deal by Under Armour, whatever. He and then as soon as the coach left, our high school team started losing. I was gone after he left, but in other words, it goes to show that it's a teacher, it's not just a talent. And so, what did we do that set us apart? Well, we did basic moves thousands of times, 6 days a week for 3 hours. We had practice, and we did the same moves over and over and over and over and over again. We didn't do these fancy, cool moves that you saw on YouTube that get a lot of views, or Instagram or whatever. We did the basic moves, and it's like that Bruce Lee quote: "I don't fear the man who knows 1,000 kicks. I fear the man who practices one kick 1,000 times." It's the same concept in the Quran. They're trying to nail in your head, very simple concepts. So now, what are those concepts? Well, first of all, it's the oneness of God. It's the all-powerfulness of God. He's one and he's all-powerful. He doesn't require assistance. He doesn't need help. He's not a man. He was never in the form of a man. He doesn't have kids. The angels aren't his kids. These other gods that people evoke, and I brought up another video regarding channeling and all that stuff, and these other gods, they can't help you on the judgment day. When you invoke whatever new age spiritual god becomes popular, they're not going to be able to help you on judgment day. It's just God who's really going to be able to help you. Okay, so it's really just the belief in God, it's really easy to believe in God because you just believe, right? It's not like you have to do anything. It's not like you have to change your lifestyle to believe in God. You just believe in God. It's believing in the judgment day, believing in the fact that at one point we are going to have to face God for all the good things we did, for all the bad things we did, and there's an everlasting afterlife, right? So that's the major thing. And even in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 62, chapter 2, verse 62, God basically says that even the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews and the Sabians and people who really just believe in one God and who believe in an afterlife are essentially going to go to heaven. So we can see that the core essence of Islam is just those two concepts. And as long as you hold those two concepts, we believe you're going to go to heaven. As long as you didn't do anything terrible like rape or murder or killing, whatever, terrible things, for the most part, you are going to go to heaven. After that, it's really just believing in the prophets and acknowledging that they were saying the truth and that these are good people who were speaking the truth, and to try to learn from their wisdom. It's acknowledging that the Quran is divine, but it's also acknowledging that the Torah and the Bible are also, the Gospels and the Torah are also divine. Those were God's previous works that he mentions. And then from there, it's, giving to charity. That's hammered down. It's not hammered down to pray, by the way. That's not hammered down. And God doesn't need your prayers. Your prayers are for us. It's hammered down to give charity, right? And that your money isn't yours. God is the one who provides. So it's your duty that if God provided you with $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year, to still give to charity within reason, right? It's a percentage. So, if you're not making a lot of money, it doesn't matter. It's the guy who makes more money and gives 1% is not as good as the guy who makes a little bit of money but gives 5% of his wealth. And so that's really the core essence of Islam. And now, you'll get some people who wonder about religion, maybe they're atheists or whatever, and one of the things they say is, well, religion could just be narrowed down to treat others how you want to be treated. And now that's a big part of religion, but that's not what the Quran really focuses on. It doesn't say like, don't, it does say don't kill, but it's not like hammering down common sense theories. It's not hammering down, we all know what we aren't supposed to do and what we aren't supposed to do. We're not just born in this world knowing that we're gonna there's an afterlife, and that there's a guy we can't see in the sky, or an entity in the sky that's all powerful that's going to judge us, and there's angels around us and there's jinn around us, and you know it's obligatory or it's required to give charity. These aren't things that people like just grow up knowing, especially when you look at the concept of when the Quran was introduced and to who it was introduced to. But it is common sense to treat others how you want to be treated, and that's why in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 62, which I mentioned earlier, about saying believe in people who are believers and people who believe in the afterlife and do good deeds, they have nothing to worry about. And so that's really the core and essence of the Quran. Now, just to bring up my wrestling example again, yeah, once you start to get really good and you hammer down the basics, then you can start to learn the more interesting or articulate moves like the splayel or whatever, just throwing things out there. And that's the same concept with Islam. When you start to really, get to a point where you're praying 5 times a day, you go to your Friday prayer and you hear the sermon, and you're giving your charity, and you understand the main concepts of heaven, and you understand the concept of hell, and you more importantly than all those things is just to actually read the Quran. And when you've read it all the way through, then you can start to get to the more advanced things. And the problem is, if you go on these YouTube or these Instagram or social media, or you hear some of these people, there's never really people who are moderate. There's always people who want to be like, oh, this is haram, this is haram, they call them the haram police. And 9 out of 10 times, those people are doing something haram themselves. They're not praying 5 times a day, whatever. They could be watching porn or having boyfriends or girlfriends, or, not fasting, maybe fasting in front of other people, whatever. And even if they are perfect, it doesn't matter. But what I've noticed is the people who are very religious aren't the ones who are talking down on other people, saying they don't practice hard enough. And it's usually the people who have their own insecurities because they don't practice religion the way they're supposed to. They're projecting it onto other people to make themselves feel good. So ultimately, you got to stay away from those people. It's kind of like the concept of the hijab. It's not actually in the Quran. It's a cultural practice that even precedes religion. But there is something to, what the Quran does say is, it says cover your adornments, cover your breasts, cover your butt. The same thing for men. I mean, you've been lifting, you go to the gym 5 days a week, mashallah, but you don't need to post your body everywhere. You should have some sort of modesty, which is good, because you don't want someone to just love you for your body, regardless if you're a man or a woman, because once, people sexually appeal themselves, that doesn't appeal to them anymore. But yeah, that's the things you can work on. It does say, to stay away from toxins or things that put you in a different mindset. So if you're smoking weed or drinking, yeah, try to stay away from that. A lot of people are young, and for the most part, statistically, once people hit like 28, they start getting away from the club. When people get older and they have kids, they start kind of not smoking weed as much. And, those are the type of things. But ultimately, there's different levels to religion. And where I would say is, the most important thing is just to believe in God, believe in the afterlife. And the nice thing is like, when you read the Quran, it seems like a simple concept, okay, believe in God. But when you read the Quran, you start to fully understand, you start to see the things like, do you not see how, God might say, do you not see how I made, the planets revolve around the sun? Or do you not see how I made the mountains deeper underground versus above ground? Or how I made currents go different directions? I mean, these are scientific discoveries that people didn't even know. I mean, there's so many scientific discoveries in the Quran that people 1400 years ago would have no idea about. And what it should make you do is feel like this level of awe at God. And when you see the life of the Prophet and the type of person he was that's outlined in the Quran, you should feel an affinity towards them. When you hear the stories about Lot and how his wife wasn't going to make it, or Noah, how his son didn't believe him about the flood, and God even said, he's not your son. Or you see the uncle of the Prophet being the worst person literally in the world, because he was terrible to the prophet. It should teach you stories that sometimes just because someone's blood related to you or close to you doesn't mean they're best for you, right? And there's just a lot of wisdom within the book that we need to take out. People might think, why is my life so terrible? And then they hear the prophet's lives and they're like, maybe there's a reason behind all of this. There's a blessing and everything that there's harm. One thing I always used to wonder is, why does God allow wars to happen, right? We have the Israel-Palestine conflict, but we also have 144 other armed conflicts in the world. And one of the things that the Quran outlines is, it says wars are a man-made thing, right? Sections, people breaking up into sections of religions, which could even mean the concept that we split into Christians, Muslims, Jews, or Sunni, Shia, or this or that. Those are all man-made concepts. So we get a lot of wisdom from it. And now when I was, when I go to if I hear the culture and they say, oh, why are wars started? Well, the wars are started because the people don't want Muslims to take over, and they see that it's growing, and these people worship the devil, and they don't want, and it's all bullshit. Okay, no, it's the reason there's wars going on is because there's people who are too stupid to read Surah al-Baqarah verse, where it says it's forbidden to kill a believer, which means a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew. They're too stupid to realize that there's a whole chapter in the Quran that's called the Romans, and it was predicting that the Romans were going to beat the Persians in battle, which they did. It predicted the future, and it called the Romans, who were Christians, believers, right? And it says, when you're dealing with the Christians, you're dealing with the Jews, be nice to them. Always start with saying, we believe in the same God. And that's just good advice for anybody. If I'm trying to meet someone and you want to find common ground, right? I mean, this is a sales technique. They even say, if you want someone to trust you, find the common ground first. Start with there. Be like, oh, I was born in 94 too. Oh, you're from Chicago. I'm from Chicago. You get what I'm saying? So there's all this wisdom in the book, and there's a lot of people who just like to talk, right? There's people who use religion as a tool to promote their political agenda, which their political agenda is the work of the devil, to be honest with you. And they use God's words and they misconstrue it in order to project, a belief. And it's just like what ISIS did. It's just like even my local sheikhs, when they talk about conflicts in the world and this and that, they reference the Quran and they say, these people, they're like, whatever, they talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict and somehow make it related to the Quran, which it isn't related to the Quran. If you want to relate it to the Quran, it's we have clear outlines in the Quran about what, are we allowed to take hostages? Are we allowed to, what we're allowed to attack, which include not attacking men, women, children, or shooting people up at a music festival, or taking 6-month-old as hostages, regardless of their religion or their nationality. We're not allowed to do those things, and you can't go and promote, those things based on making something up that's not in the Quran. So I know I'm going, and that applies to all religions. It's not just applies to Muslims. It applies to any religion. All religions do that. All people do that. And so that's why, what I want people to do is, I have this book here. It's called The Clear Quran. It's like one of probably the most famous translation of the Quran in English. It has annotations. And if you're interested in what Islam is about, if you're a Muslim yourself and you've been a Muslim your whole life, if you're an atheist, if you're agnostic, if you're Christian, Jew, whatever, just pick it up and read it, right? Because you'll see things even like Surah Al-Atfal. It says, make peace with your enemies. I mean, you see how God is loving, merciful. He's always there, basically saying it's never too late to turn to me. And you just start to understand that Islam is simple. There's this whole concept of, when you do wudu, you have to do, first you do your hand, and then you do your wrist, and then you do this, and if you mess up the order, it doesn't count, and you have to do it 3 times each. Okay, that's not in the Quran. The concept of, you have to walk into the masjid with your right foot. Okay, that's not in the Quran. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. The concept of wearing the hijab, that's not in the Quran. It just says cover your private parts. A lot of these concepts aren't in the Quran. Even the concept that, a Muslim woman can't marry a non-Muslim person, that's not in the Quran. There's a lot of things that the culture will push on you that's not really in there. So that's why I say that the best essence in order to understand the Quran and understand Islam is just pick up the book and read it yourself. And, you know, to summarize the main concepts that you can kind of get from any longer chapter, because it kind of repeats the concept, is just to believe in God and to understand that He's the Almighty, He's the All-Powerful. He doesn't rely on anyone, but we rely on Him, and that there's a judgment day, and that all the good you do is going to be remembered and seen, and all the bad you're going to do is remembered and seen, and you're going to be questioned for all the bad things you do. And I mean, honestly, those two things, if you just follow those are really the main things. Um, you know, and that's not really all I want to talk about, because I think that's, if you read the Quran, that's 99% of it. You know, and the Quran is simple. It's easy to understand. So that's just food for thought. So if you're out there wondering about Islam, wondering about the Quran, um, just pick it up and read it. That's the best way. Don't go on YouTube. Don't even go to your local sheikh or your mosque or whatever. You can do that later down the road, but pick up the book, because the book hasn't changed. It's been relatively stable since it was introduced, you know, to Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so it's the ultimate source of figuring out religion, because that's what the whole religion is centered around, is the Quran. So thank you very much, and please subscribe.